Y'all, I want to start with something that frustrates me. I said it. I hear this all the time from successful entrepreneurs when they've had the opportunity to like move forward in their business and they're doing really great. There's always this theme of like, well, just take the leap, right? Like, just go ahead and get the business started and take more risks. And you have to be willing to fail. And every single time I hear that, as someone who has had a business now for a number of years, I think that's easy for you to say. If you've got this huge safety net where if you take the risk, you can actually fall for 5 minutes and take a moment and recover. And yes, your ego may be bruised. And yes, you may feel really embarrassed about everything. But, it's not actually expensive to fail. I mean, it's expensive possibly for the people that invested in your company that lost money. It's expensive for those people that were on payroll. But for you personally, it's not expensive for you to fail. But for the rest of us that don't have a safety net, we need to have this conversation today. Okay. If you and I have never met before, my name is Maya Haradat. I'm a business coach and speaker, and I help entrepreneurs uncover what they don't know that they don't know about running successful businesses. And I want to dive into this conversation around failure, but specifically failure for those of us that don't have a large safety net, right? Failure is expensive for us. This is not just about like, I feel really bad that, the business went out of business and I got to change my LinkedIn or my resume right now. No, failure is I can't pay my mortgage. Failure means I'm going down to the soup kitchen or I'm heading out to the pantry and hoping they put those groceries on sale because can nobody afford the prices of everything going on right now. But they definitely can't afford it if you're making a mistake and you fail in your business. There's real consequences. And I think for a lot of advice that entrepreneurs are being given, it doesn't take into account the different places and spaces people are coming from when they're getting a business started. And listen, for years, I thought when I used to hear this advice, I thought something was wrong with me, right? I've never been afraid of working hard, okay? Any 70s or 80s babies out there that can relate, you understand what I'm referencing here, right? When someone tells you to work hard, you like, what we got to do, just show up and make things happen because that's what we do, right? I've always worked hard. That's not a problem. I've always loved learning. Truth be told, if I actually had the gazillion dollars that I didn't have to work anymore, I'd probably be sitting down reading books. My love affair when I was a kid is I used to spend hours in the library. I used to love reading stories and reading books and learning because it's interesting to me. It's fascinating to learn and really uncover all the different places and spaces that kind of exist about questions that I just never thought about in this world, right? And I even think about when I first got the business started and, the idea of like, oh, I got to make rent. Let me go out there and go talk to some people. And even if they tell me no, it's okay, right? Like, I'll give you a little tip. If you have a young girl, put her in Girl Scouts and have her sell Girl Scout cookies, not you selling the cookies, have her sell the cookies, okay? Because it gives you a little bit of courage, it gives you a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration on learning how to put yourself out there and how to be able to talk to people when they tell you no and handle that rejection, right? And it's Girl Scout cookies. So if they don't sell them, they don't sell them, whatever. But it teaches you some basic skills that now when you become an adult, I know that's where some of that got started from. Of where I'm like, okay, I'll put myself out there. You might say yes, you might say no, but let's try it. But this idea of, you can just fail. No, I got a family. And my family can't afford that failure to happen because we're not operating with generational wealth of years and years of a safety net underneath us, right? And so, look, I feel really, really blessed with the work that I do. I've worked with a number of clients over my career. I think about some of the clients that when I first started delivering youth entrepreneurship programs, I got to be behind the scenes of different conferences. And so I got to hear guest speakers that normally I would have to pay thousands of dollars to get access to those speakers, right? I'm working with a client right now where we're doing work around access to capital. And I'm getting into the weeds on financing and lending and grants and how businesses actually grow. Like, what does it take for a business to actually grow? And y'all, they don't ask questions about, do you believe in yourself? Are you passionate about this idea? They're asking a whole set of different questions. They're asking about your cash flow. They're asking about your profit margins. They're asking about What is your plan if things don't go the way you hope they go? Which, by the way, that's a whole conversation all by itself. I think for a lot of people, if you just sat down and just worked through, well, if things don't work out, what options could I try? Right? Like, what does that actually look like? And listen, if you've never run a business before, that it seems kind of like, well, I would just go back and get a job again. And that is an option. But I actually almost challenge you to really sit down and think through creatively and get support and guidance from mentors and coaches. And, there's advisors like through the SBDC, for example, that can really sit down and help you strategize what happens to your plan if sales are slower than expected. What do you do? How do you navigate? You don't have to immediately say, well, I'm just going to slash and burn everything. Sometimes you have to. But a lot of times, if you talk through what your goals are, you can actually set your business up so that even when the recessions hit, because every business goes through these up and down cycles, by the way, every business does. But you can actually set your business up so that even when the sales, rather than the sales drop, you have a way of being able to recover and navigate a lot quicker, right? This question that I'm hearing now a lot everywhere, which is, well, how much capital do you actually need for your business? I could always use $100,000. I could always use $500,000, but how do you use that to be able to make more within your business? What's your plan? What's your strategy? Years ago, I remember that, I was involved in a grant, I was involved in a competition that was offering a grant. And this is back when grants were really unheard of. I know during the pandemic, everybody and their mama and every foundation and every group had grants, right? And that was a beautiful thing. We needed that. But I'm talking about way back when grants, there were very, very few and far between. And I distinctly remember going into that competition knowing that in order to win, it wasn't enough for me to say, I need the money for my business, because everybody there needed the money for their business. There's always expenses you have. I needed to think smarter about the money I needed for my business. And I needed to think about, how does that help me make money? So I specifically remember that there was a new offering in my business that I was trying to sell, and I needed some startup capital in order to be able to print. In this case, it was workbooks. There was curriculum from different clients that wanted some of my curriculum. And back then, this is the beginning of the print on demand industry. I needed capital to be able to print the workbooks out that I could then sell to current and future clients. So for me, it wasn't like I'm applying for the business and I need money to operate the business. I need money for, keeping up my website or travel, or AKA for my own pockets, right? Because that's what a lot of times it happens. No, it's really thinking thoughtfully about, how does that money help you make more money? Now, when you start asking those types of questions, and then you hear this nonsense about, being fearless, right? And taking risks, it starts to kind of change things, because you get the opportunity to start realizing the ways that you can start making calculated decisions in your business, the ways that you can start reducing uncertainty. I know for people, that's the reason they don't want to go into business, because it's the uncertainty. You can actually ask questions about your business that help you figure out how to move forward. And honestly, I wish that's what entrepreneurs were taught about, right? This nonsense about take a risk and, be fearless and things of that nature. It works for certain groups, but for a lot of us, I just wish that you learned how to ask better questions before you get started, because you feel like you have to play this either or game. Either I'm going to play it safe and stay at the job, or just keep the business, just earning a couple $100 and I keep the day job, or I got to risk everything in order to be able to do it. Now, look, I actually am sitting here and I did kind of sort of risk everything. It really wasn't planned that way. I'm in that crew that the job, the company folded, and then I had to figure out what I was going to do in the interim. And so that's where the business started from. But I've gone back to my business twice over my career. And the second time, it wasn't because I had to risk everything in order to be able to do it. I had already been figuring out the strategy and the plan of how to take some of the risk off of the table. Here's the deal. When you're trying to make more money in your business, when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to not just, you're getting more sales coming in, and then you're looking for that actual, where does the money come from? Where does the growth come from? Growth is not this dramatic thing, y'all. I think people get this all mixed up, right? Growth is shifting from you going to events where you have to be selling one-on-one like crazy to you figuring out the pattern where you can now hire a team. And by the way, you can hire them for the day. You don't even have to hire them permanently, right? But hire a team, get this team to be engaged, create a process that makes it easy for them to be engaged. I know everyone always says, oh, but they don't work as hard as I do. No, they don't. And your job is to create the process, right? Like if you think about, if I go into any fast food restaurant right now, right? And some of you might have seen the Ray Kroc story. Like that dude was passionate about his McDonald's. Like he was super passionate. But the point of why McDonald's was successful and still is successful is they created a system that didn't rely on his passion to sell the hamburgers. Get it? Whether you like the McDonald's hamburgers or not, that's not the point. It's creating the systems so that you don't have to be there. You don't have to be as passionate. The person working there doesn't have to be as passionate as you are, but that you're thinking about the growth. What are the strategic partnerships you need to have, right? What are the investments that you need to make in the business? And don't give me the pie in the sky investments. I just saw a business plan pitch recently, and somebody was saying, oh, we don't have this type of entertainment in our area, and I want to create a 500,000 square foot type of entertainment in the area like this. And the person, listen, I actually was here for the type of entertainment because they did their research. That form of entertainment did not exist, but could you at least test one event with the form of entertainment and see if people actually want to pay for it or not, right? Like, don't go just from 0 to 500,000. Start figuring out ways of making small steps. Start figuring out ways of hiring 1 or 2 people. One of the smartest hires that I made, I remember a few years ago, I was working on a few contracts and I knew that I could deliver the entire contract. Now, this is the key. I want you to hear this. I chose, instead of doing 100% of the work, I took on about 50%, and in some cases, 40% of the work. I hired someone else to be able to deliver on the other parts of the work. I remained client facing, so I was the one who dealt with the client. I hired someone else to kind of go behind the scenes and do some of the heavy lifting writing and some of the research and the things that needed to happen behind the scenes. And then I went out and got more work. That's the strategy, y'all. It's thinking about a way that allows your business to grow. How does that employee put ROI in your pocket? It's not about giving the employee the type of activities that you just don't want to be doing anymore. Okay. Like, yes, that is some crazy, like, oh, we're just going to, hope and pray and live on passion that the business grows. Look, I'll even out myself here. One of the first tasks that I gave one of my first assistants to do was I had them help me create invoices. And it may sound really stupid. You're like, but Maya, doesn't the bookkeeping software that you have create invoices? Yes, it does. But what Maya would do is Maya would procrastinate about doing those invoices, and I wouldn't get them out in a timely fashion, right? I'd be procrastinating about, oh, well, what if I try this and I add this to the invoice and, is it this date or should I use that date, or I don't really know. When I had someone else who I put in charge of that, I actually started making more money. Watch this. Because I was getting the invoices out in a timely fashion, I was tracking when they weren't coming back in a timely fashion, and I could turn my attention in the business to another area that started to make more money. It's growth. It's growth, y'all. Don't get it twisted about focusing on this craziness of being fearless, of being a risk taker and being bold. You do have to have some of that in business. I want to be clear. But growth ain't always this like giant leap. Like you come home today and you start with $100 and then tomorrow you got, a gazillion. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it's a series of well-informed decisions. Sometimes it's you sitting down and thinking about your business and thinking strategically about how to do things, not to be unethical, not to be out of integrity. We're not doing that nonsense, but it's really thinking through, how do I grow? What is this problem that my business solves that only my business solves? How do I make sure that the audience that I'm serving, or that I think that I'm serving, that there's still a need a week from now, 3 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, they're going to continue to want to pay me? And then how do I create the system that keeps people continually coming back to me? We got to stop confusing this nonsense of confidence of like, that's what's going to make you the gazillion dollars, right? It's not about certainty. I think that there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs. I've met quite a few of them at different events. They don't always feel certain. They just gather enough information, make a decision, test it. And that's often the missing thing. Test it in some way, shape, or form, and then you adjust. And that's a very, very different plan. So I want to kind of pull this all back together and just share, listen, if you've ever found yourself saying, well, I can't afford to fail, like, that idea of taking this big risk, whether it's starting the business or whether it's growing it in another area, that's a very fair question. And if you're someone like me that you don't have this, I don't come from, 6 generations of wealth behind me. I just don't. I am creating the safety nets. I've had some help and I'm grateful for the help, but the safety net ain't really like this, it just is what it is. I want to ask you a different question. Instead of asking, what if this doesn't work? Hear me out now. What information would help me make a better decision? And for a lot of us, it's understanding your numbers. The numbers that you need in business, by the way, it's simple math. It's multiplication, division, subtraction, and addition. And not that new math nonsense they teach, but the old math. I promise you. It's understanding your numbers. Do you know your profit margins? Do you wake up every morning knowing what your break even in your business is, right? So like in my business, I know exactly how long I have until my bank account hits zero, how many months or days that it is until it hits zero, right? And I also know what it takes in order to get a new client in. I know what my close rate is. So if I talk to X number of people, how many people do I have to talk to before I close them? And look, and it looks different in different times. During the pandemic, we were all home. My online coaching looked a whole lot different than it does now that we back out in these streets again. Back out in these streets and things cost more than they do. But that's the key. Understand your numbers. And sometimes your numbers are going to shift. The market shifts, it changes. But if you have a baseline, right? Like I knew years ago that I would have a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 close rate with my coaching product. And then it started to shift and it changed, right? And it got a little bit higher. Maybe it's 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7. Again, totally fine. But I know the number then. And you can do the work based upon knowing that number versus I hope I get a client. See that? I hope I get a client. If you're doing events, for example, outdoors, how many people have to walk past your table before somebody stops and buys? There is a number, by the way. There is legitimately and honestly a number. You have to figure that out. What do you do to tip the scales in your favor to get more people that walk by to be interested in buying? Yes, right? So I've done this thing with groups that I've worked with in the past is how do you talk with potential customers before you launch? So with that event, for example, can you get people signing up before you show up at that event? One of my all-time favorite sales stories is from a client that I worked with years ago, and she was smart. She would do a catering, she would cater for different types of small events. And the way that she did it, and it was brilliant, is she would make sure she sold out before she stepped foot into the venue. She never worried about what the foot traffic was in the venue because, truth be told, she wasn't going to be able to serve the folks in the venue. She just literally was delivering the orders that she had already placed in advance. That's thinking through things. That's actually testing it out there and making sure that failure is not an option. Do you need to start testing your offers more frequently? Probably, to see if people will buy them. What's the feedback and the objections they give you when they say no? Well, toss it out and see what happens. What do 5 people say? What do 10 people say? Get their honest feedback, not the feedback you want to hear. Get their honest feedback. Why? If they say no, say like, oh, okay, cool. Listen, I appreciate that you said no. If you have a minute, right, and you will not offend me, but it would really, really, really help me out. I'm curious as to why you said no. And then don't grill them where you torture them, but get their honest feedback as to what the reason is. Are they not your ideal client type? That's information. Then you know you have to go after somebody else. Is it priced too high? And you know that that's really what the actual price needs to be because that's what you need to cover your expenses. Okay. Is there a way that you can give a portion of what it is that you're offering? Right? Like I love right now what's happening within the baking industry right now. All of these events are doing small. I see a lot of small cakes that are happening because people are not. We're not spending a ton of money. We're not doing the large events. So the baking industry is like, I got you. We'll do a smaller cake. I'm still going to be able to know what my expenses are and what I'm going to be able to profit off of each of these individual items. But if you're not going to spend $100 with me on the big cake like you used to before, I'm going to have you spend $25 on these small slices here, and we're still going to be able to kind of meet each other, at a certain point. Okay. When you start thinking like this is how you set your business up for growth. Okay. This is how you defeat, I'll just say it straight, you defeat the enemy of failure, right? Are you going to have bumps along the way? You're going to learn things? Yes. Are things probably going to take longer than you wish that they would take in order to get to the next level? 1,000%. They always do. But you have to start thinking like a business owner. That's the key. It's using whatever it is that you have to leverage what you have to then be able to understand how to be able to navigate things. And I think personally that this myth that, successful people take bigger risks, that's garbage, y'all. That's garbage. I think successful people understand risk better. They calculate it. They prepare for it. They build a business that can survive the mistakes. How do you build your business to survive the mistakes? Build it in there. How do you do that, right? Because the mistakes are going to happen. I made them. I can talk to mentors and coaches that have coached me on them. That's just part of entrepreneurship. I can listen to every successful person out there. That's part of entrepreneurship. Your goal is not to avoid the mistakes. Your goal is to build the business that is resilient enough to recover. Okay? So while you're building this business right now and you're paying the bills and you're taking care of your family, whether it's aging parents or young kids or just, family members in general, and you're thinking about, I want to create this better future, I want you to know something. You are not behind. You are not. Okay? You're not less entrepreneurial at all. You're simply carrying the responsibilities that many do not talk about. They act like those things are not there. The whole caregiver conversation, do not get me started. It's one of the top priorities that the UN has. And I think for a lot of places and spaces on this planet, we act like caregiving doesn't exist. And it does exist. But then that's why you have to really take time to make decisions that require thought, not less. Okay? Strategy, y'all. It's not about gambling with your future to build one. You have to learn how to make better decisions because you're going to gain confidence from it. So don't pretend that there aren't any risk, and don't act like you can, just ignore them either. Confidence is going to come when you understand what the risks are and you build the business, and a business, even when you can't afford to fail, that you understand you've really thought through. So I hope this video gave you some ideas and gave you some suggestions of what you can do to get started on next tips. I've got some really good freebies underneath this video. Go ahead and click the links underneath. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this video for more, because I'm going to give out more insights and advice on growth in your business.